That night, the wind from the shores of Stagira did not merely blow, it trembled, as if it knew a child had just been born. Not a soldier, not a king, but someone who would one day shake the entire foundation of human thought. From a young age, he was not a worshiper of wonders, he was a hunter of explanations. While other children played in the mud, he stared at the sky and asked, "Why is everything so orderly?" That question became the ember that burned in his mind every night. He hungered, not for power but for understanding. Athens welcomed him like a stage on fire. In Plato's Academy, the debating hall was no safe space. Every argument was a bullet, and young Aristotle stepped inside not to hide, but to rattle the very core of how humans think. He sliced through theories with logic, challenged his own teacher, peeled back the layers of ideas considered sacred. Nothing escaped his sharp gaze. To Aristotle, the world was not a mystical riddle, but a map that could be read. He built deductive logic like a fortress of iron. He wove a structure of thought no longer reliant on wonder, but on order, cause, and evidence. In a classroom lit by torches, he forged something stronger than any sword, a way for humanity to reach the truth. Time moved on, civilizations fell, cities burned, but his legacy never died. It seeped silently through language, law, science, and technology, as if every thought in the modern world stood upon the invisible tips of his fingers. In courtrooms, laboratories, classrooms, even casual conversations, Aristotle's patterns of thought pulse, nameless but alive. He lives inside the minds of millions not as a god, but as thought itself. That night, Plato's Academy wasn't a school. It became a gladiator arena, not with swords but with logic. And at its center stood Aristotle. The torches in the Academy flickered in the night wind, casting the shadows of thinkers onto marble walls. Plato sat calm like the eye of a storm. Students formed a circle, and in the middle of that circle, Aristotle's eyes blazed like fire. "The world is not merely the shadow of ideas," he declared. Not a question, a strike. Plato looked at his student like a sailor facing a wave that could capsize his boat. Aristotle stepped forward, dismantling his teacher's vision. The real world was more important than the perfect forms. Knowledge must be born from observation, not dreams. Each sentence was a bullet, each rebuttal a thunderclap. Plato's students held their breath. No one had ever challenged the master like this. But Aristotle was no ordinary student. He did not want to learn. He wanted to move the foundation itself. That night, the hall of the Academy trembled. The fire of logic was lit, never to be extinguished. Plato knew this flame would outgrow him. He had birthed a thinker who would surpass his own name. No swords, no armies. But that night, Aristotle was forging the deadliest weapon in history, logic. In a dim room, he sat alone. Papyrus scattered. The torch burned low, but his mind was ablaze. He arranged syllogisms like soldiers in formation. Major premise, minor premise, conclusion. If all men are mortal, and Socrates is a man, then Socrates is mortal. A simple line, but from it, the first machine of human reasoning was born. In a world ruled by myth, Aristotle raised not a spear but the intellect. He wrote the structure of thought itself. Something war could not burn, fire could not bury, and time could not erase. Centuries later, kingdoms collapsed. Libraries were lost. But Aristotle's weapon slipped through the cracks of history into language, law, and science. He did not die. He hid in the minds of everyone. A boy of 13 would one day conquer the world. But before he held a sword, he sat before a philosopher. The palace of Macedonia rumbled with the march of soldiers. But in one silent chamber, Aristotle taught Alexander something far sharper than any blade. How to think. "A sword can seize lands," he whispered. "But thought can make the world bow without blood." Each lesson was a subtle poison, seeping into the young prince's soul. He learned to read his enemies not through their eyes, but through their minds. He learned to rule not by force, but by the architecture of knowledge. While other children played, Alexander studied the stars, laws, and politics. Aristotle was not merely shaping a king. He was forging a living thinking machine. Years later, Alexander set foot on 3 continents. But behind every victory was the shadow of a teacher from Stagira. In an age when asking why meant defying the heavens, Aristotle did it without flinching. At the foot of a grand temple, he gazed at the stars. People whispered in fear, "That's where the gods live." But Aristotle only murmured, "The stars do not move by gods, but by law." Those words were thunder. In that era, such words could silence a man forever. But he stood firm, trading myth for logic, fear for the structure of the real world. He did not destroy faith. He challenged ignorance, and from his lips came a way of thinking that would erode false miracles for millennia. Cities could burn, papyrus could vanish, but one thing could never be destroyed: a way of thinking. War claimed many of Aristotle's works, fire devoured scrolls of knowledge, but his logic did not perish. It slipped through his students, through the marketplaces of Athens, through debates that never stopped. He did not build a library of stone. He built a library of human minds. And when the flames died down, his ideas were already alive in hundreds of heads. To the priests, Aristotle was not a philosopher. He was a living threat. He stood in the agora, surrounded by a crowd. The temple priest pointed at him, shouting, "He insults the gods!" But Aristotle only smiled faintly. He was not attacking heaven. He was attacking ignorance. He rejected the answer, because the gods will it. He stripped away every myth with an unshakable question: why? And slowly, even those who cursed him began to think like him. Thousands of years after his death, Aristotle still whispers in classrooms. His writings were translated in Baghdad, taught in Europe, revived by modern scientists. He is no longer a body, but a long shadow stretching from Stagira across the world. Every revolution in knowledge follows the path he once carved. Every book, every theory, every algorithm carries his breath. His weapon is invisible, but it has pierced human minds for millennia. Aristotle's logic flows into law, science, rhetoric, technology. He did not conquer cities. He conquered the way we understand cities. Every computer algorithm, every legal debate, every scientific discovery, all of it stands on one unseen foundation: his pattern of thought. Many figures die with their age, but Aristotle never left. He left behind no armies. He left behind a structure of thinking, a force that slips silently into every mind. Every time we draw a conclusion, every time we argue, every time we analyze the world, we speak in his language. He is not just a name in history books. He is a pulse inside the human mind.